There he is.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, good to start. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Sebastian Osborne. I'm a Global Policy Manager with Mercy for Animals, and I'm very excited to open this event, which I'll be moderating, which is at the Food for Climate Pavilion at COP28 in Dubai, and we're co-hosting this event, Mercy for Animals, along with Aquatic Life Institute. And we're going to be talking about blue foods today. And this is a really important topic because it's something that's being increasingly discussed in climate conversations. And blue foods are a diverse category that includes thousands of species of plants and animals harvested wild or cultivated from marine and freshwater systems. And the attention that we're seeing on these foods in climate conversations is really important. Blue foods make critical contributions to food security, nutrition, and livelihoods. However, blue foods vary tremendously in their environmental impacts, contributions to food security, livelihoods, as well as along many other dimensions as well. And this can vary depending both on the species, but also on the methods of production and the locations of production and consumption. In many cases, these assessments will involve a complex assessment of trade-offs, both internationally and internationally. So I'm excited to open today and pass over to Walter Sanchez Suarez, a scientific researcher on animal welfare, public health, and sustainable food systems at Mercy for Animals, who's going to provide us with a scene setting for our event today. And Walter, over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone from Spain. Today I will be talking about the concept of blue foods and its implications in terms of sustainability. I believe you will be showing the slides for me now, so if you could please show the first slide of my presentation. Okay, that's great. So, blue food or blue foods in plural is an umbrella term that has been typically used to describe those animals, plants, and algae, including microorganisms, produced in and gathered from freshwater and marine environments. This concept refers to a very wide range of food systems related to activities of fisheries and aquaculture, and now it also includes emerging new technologies such as plant and cell-based systems, with this latter also known as culture or cultivated seafood and involving in vitro production of tissues of aquatic organisms. Next slide, please. Probably you are already familiar with this image. It illustrates the production figures and in most cases the rapid growth of these types of systems in the past decades. Here, data for algae were not included, but this industry has been also experiencing rapid growth. Next slide, please. In the last years, aquatic foods have been proposed as essential contributors to the goal of building sustainable food systems globally. Here, for instance, you can see a couple recent scientific papers on this topic. The number of practices or systems known as blue or aquatic foods, however, is enormous and extremely diverse. Just think globally about all the practices that are related to this broad concept. Please, next slide. This slide, for instance, portrays artisanal fisheries in Senegal. Next one, please. Here, bivalve production in Bateas, a traditional system in the Atlantic coast of Galicia in northwestern Spain. Next one, please. In this one, you can see a fishing vessel engaging industrial bottom trawling in the Mediterranean Sea. Next one, please. Here you can see cages in the Paraná River in Brazil where tilapia, a fish, is farmed under very high stocking densities. Next one, please. Here, a red seaweed farm in the Philippines. Next one, please. Here, an on-land salmon farm using a recirculation system. They are known as RAS. And next slide, please. Finally, sorry, previous one. Yeah, here you can see a plant where cultured meat is being produced. So just to put it in a proper context, a similar rationale regarding terrestrial or land-based food systems would entail placing all types of foods produced on land under the same single category. The reality is that the concept of blue or aquatic foods is a simplification, and obviously there is great variation among these food systems. It is thus essential to avoid misleading generalizations and instead focus on identifying and promoting those systems supported by robust scientific evidence as beneficial from a sustainability viewpoint, and at the same time, stress the need to transition away from those that are shown detrimental. Next slide, please. In the context of this COP28, many discussions will be related to greenhouse gases, emission estimations, and life cycle assessments, but that's only part of the whole sustainability picture. The concept of One Health and the related one of One Welfare holistically illustrate the complexity within the sustainability equation. As you can see in this slide, GHG emission and in general, the anthropogenic implications in terms of environmental change are an essential part of the picture. But it is crucial to also take into account those many aspects related to the health and well-being of human populations, as well as those related to the health and welfare of non-human animals, including both farmed and wild. As we see here, all these aspects are tightly interconnected and influence each other. Next slide, please. Sorry, please, next one. Thank you. This recent publication is an example of how scientists are already supporting this comprehensive and more realistic approach, in this case in relation to aquaculture practices. Next slide. This slide from another recent paper illustrates the most key aspects, here referred as stressors, related to each aquatic food system that should be considered in order to understand to what extent a food system is beneficial or detrimental in terms of sustainability. Next slide, please. This figure, for instance, shows the estimate emissions for different food production practices categorized as blue foods. As you can see, evidence indicates that some types, such as algae and bivalve production, outperform other aquaculture practices, and also fisheries in terms of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus emissions, even acting as effective sequestration strategies. Same good performance for these systems can be observed in terms of water and land use. As shown in the previous image, however, it is crucial to also consider many other key aspects, such as energy requirements and impacts in the surrounding ecosystems. Low again in the case of bivalve and algae farming. For instance, and depending on the type of gear and the intensity of the practices, many fishing systems are shown to damage ecosystems, often disrupting food webs and leading to population depletion and even species extinction. These aspects do not only threaten the viability of these food production practices and are therefore a source of food insecurity, but also create serious environmental consequences. On the other hand, and when considering aquacultural practices, on top of the impacts of the different systems in terms of water and land pollution, it is essential to assess their potential links to on-land deforestation and to harmful monocultures, as well as their dependency on unsustainable fisheries and other animal byproducts. This is often the case in fish farming, especially for those industries exploiting carnivore species. Additional aspects to consider and the roles of these systems in terms of potential for directly or indirectly increasing animal disease, and for contributing to zoonotic events, that is, diseases that are transmitted from non-human animals to humans, including very serious public health challenges such as antimicrobial resistance. Next one, please. This final slide from a very recent paper also stresses a related key point, which is the vulnerability of these different systems to environmental change and especially to anthropogenic impacts. Together with aspects related to nutritional attributes, production efficiency, and again, to food security and food safety, the whole set of stressors mentioned before must be taken into account holistically for the very different practices that fall under the umbrella term of blue foods. Next one, please. So, in conclusion, blue foods is an umbrella concept that accounts for a very large and diverse number of food systems related to aquatic organisms. It is essential to avoid generalizations and instead keep gathering the most robust evidence in terms of understanding the impacts and vulnerabilities of these systems in relation to sustainability. This is especially relevant for events such as this COP28, where very important decisions regarding how to build a sustainable scenario in the shortest possible time are being taken. Unless we do so, the goal of building food systems that are beneficial for the environment and for the health and well-being of both human and non-human animals, and very importantly, that work in the different regions of the planet, will not be reached. Next slide, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Walter. And I think those remarks and the information you shared really brings to light the incredible diversity and complexity of these systems and the need for climate policy to avoid and to navigate the risks either of ignoring these systems, as we've sometimes seen in the past, or as treating these as simple solutions, but instead to consider them in a really robust, nuanced, and expert way. And on that note, I'm very excited to introduce and open our panel discussion. We have three amazing panelists who are experts with us today to share their perspectives. We have Sofia Kostyniuk, Managing Director of the Aquatic Life Institute. We have Kiki Oluwarore, who's the founder of the One Health and Development Initiative. And we have Tony Soalablai, who is Communications Director for Friends of the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. So I'm going to give each of our panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves and their work and share some initial perspectives before we move on to questions and discussion. And I'll start with Sofika.
Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much to Mercy for Animals for partnering on this wonderful event. And also thank you to COP28 for including this really, really important conversation in the broader dialogue. If we want to get serious about tackling the climate crisis, we must begin addressing our food systems and no longer proceed with the status quo. It's been incredibly problematic. At Aquatic Life Institute, we dedicate all of our time and energy to reducing the suffering of aquatic animals caught in the global food system. These are both farmed aquatic animals as well as wild aquatic animals. And in very conservative estimates, that suffering is extraordinary. At minimum, 2 to 3 trillion individual animals are caught, farmed, and killed in often very brutal ways every single year to feed part of the global population. There are many ways to do status quo differently and change the status quo. When we think about animal welfare, which is really what drives our mission at Aquatic Life Institute, some people just don't initially see the connection to climate impacts and climate change, but they're actually intrinsically interwoven with each other. Animal welfare, when we think about just the general practices and problematic practices in fishing and aquaculture, will soon come to light. How we treat the animals and we interact with them, and how this actually impacts the environment and our climate. When we think about the global fishing fleet on its own, almost exclusively the vessels are powered by diesel engines. Huge GHG emissions just from the vessels themselves. These are some of the hidden costs and negative impacts of the fishing industry. When we think about sort of iconic problematic practices like bottom trawling, as was mentioned by Walter, we are ripping up benthic environments, releasing extremely large quantities of sequestered carbon from the seafloor. Some estimates and publications in Nature were calculating that the amount of carbon that is released from the bottom of the ocean every year when we bottom trawl is equivalent to the entire emissions of the global aviation fleet. That is staggering. It has been put into question, the actual, number at the end of that calculation, but it is an astounding amount. When we also think about a species-specific farming practice like shrimp farming, often shrimp farming is conducted in coastal ecosystems in the tropics, where otherwise there would be lush mangrove forests. When those forests are ripped out for these monoculture high-intensity farms, we lose the ability to sequester carbon. We lose the ability to protect coastlines from intense climate events. We lose vital nurseries for countless aquatic animals. That in itself, highly problematic. The ponds, these monoculture ponds, are often very intensely infiltrated with chemicals, with pesticides, with antibiotics that lead to antimicrobial resistance, as Walter had also mentioned. So these are compounding impacts of poor practices that need to change. So there are many such examples which we can explore later on. I would like to say that I actually deeply believe that Blue Foods can and should be a part of the climate solution, but we need to be extremely mindful, extremely selective, and extremely intentional about which practices we adopt, which ones we promote, and which ones we invest our time and energy and resources in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofika. And I'll now I'll turn over to Kiki, and looking forward to hearing about your work and your perspectives on this important topic.
Great. Hello, everyone. And thank you again for having me. And I'm really happy to be involved in this conversation. So I am Kiki Okpe Oluwarere, and I am the founder of One Health and Development Initiative. It's a nonprofit organization that works to address correlated issues of human, animal, and environmental health using the One Health approach. I think the One Health approach is really like a very key part of what we do in terms of addressing all these public health and sustainable development issues. And I'm a veterinarian by training, and I work primarily in terms of One Health and public health and animal welfare sector. So in terms of, I think I will speak more on the role of doing Blue Foods right, the One Health way. And I think this is very important because, when you think about what exactly does the One Health approach mean, it means a multi-sectoral approach to addressing different issues that affect humans, animals, and environment, understanding and implementing those intricate relationships that occur along the human, animal, and environmental interface. And in the context of Blue Foods, we know that depending on how sustainable we do Blue Foods in terms of consumption, in terms of utilization of resources, in terms of all of the things that encompass the blue economy, everything has a direct impact on One Health. So we understand that sustainable use of resources of foods in Blue Foods in the context of this is really important. And we need to be much more aware of the all-encompassing impact of our actions, meaning that whatever we do in whichever way we do it, they have, it's not just about us humans living in these environments. It's about really how are we treating our animals. I'm glad that Sofika said a lot about the welfare aspect. How are we depleting our resources, at what rate, and what impact is it having in the short and long-term effects? And now tying it to climate change, we also know that, over the last couple of years, we've also seen the impacts that climate change has on One Health. And a very core part of climate change we know is our oceans. So, whatever actions that we take in terms of the Blue Foods, in terms of blue economy, it can affect things like, rising temperatures, it can affect biodiversity, it can affect the conservation. And all of these things, again, have very far-reaching impacts than just, the One Health impact that I mentioned. And so it's an opportunity for us to really, educate and, promote awareness and promote action on doing Blue Foods right, using that One Health encompassing approach. And maybe it is also a way to even drive incentive to get communities, to get people to work together, to join resources, to leverage on their resources, leverage on their expertise in how to collaboratively work together and, be able to, utilize and conserve blue resources as sustainably as possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiki. And I'm now excited to turn to Tony, who will be able to share her perspective working on these issues in Palau.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tony. I work for Friends of the Palau National Marine Sanctuary. If you did not know what the PNMS is, it protects 80% of Palau's water. So what we do at Friends of the PNMS, we have work with ocean conservationists. We have partners with the Palau Sports Fishing Association. So what we try to do is to introduce pelagic fish to our school systems, to government functions, to make sure that it's integrated into everybody's daily diet, from reducing the stress, the pressure on the reefs. We introduced having pelagics into our diet just because it's meatier protein, it has more to go around, and it's healthier all the way around. So from what we know, 80% of Palau's food source is imported. What we can do from that is to kind of take it back to our traditional ways of eating, to introduce root crops into our diets again, but to also kind of spread awareness and to be more sustainable in our everyday lives. And so what Palau Pledge has done, what Friends of the PNMS has done, all of these initiatives kind of come together to support and to promote sustainable eating. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. And now, building on these amazing introductions, we'll maybe start with a question for you first, Tony. How do you think policies can do what you're doing in Palau and reflect the diversity of Blue Foods?
So in 2015, the Palau National Marine Sanctuary was put into the government to protect our waters. And from that, the Choose Pelagics campaign was created in 2017 by the Palau Conservation Society. And that was to reduce the stress and the pressure on the reefs. It was to promote sustainable and local produced foods. It was to share with everybody who comes into Palau the local diet, the local culture. And lastly, it was just to introduce it into school so our young school children would be eating healthier. With the kind of bigger outlook on it, we also wanted to give artisanal fishers, existing fishers, and future fishers a way to kind of develop their jobs, their livelihoods, and kind of connect with culture as well to make sure that moving forward we have these healthier ways to sustain. Yeah.
Incredible work. Thank you for sharing about that. And I wanted to ask Kiki now, what are the links that you see between the blue economy, between climate change and One Health also?
I was muted. All right, thank you for that question. Now, in very simple terms, we understand, and I'm going to talk in a broader context now. The blue economy itself, it means that we're able to sustainably use your resources without damaging the aquatic environment. And in the context of blue food, this is really important. I mean, in terms of climate change impact, it kind of explains itself because we know that by using blue foods resources sustainably, you are not damaging the environment, the temperature, like I mentioned about temperature levels, which has a lot of far-reaching impacts is maintained. The aquatic life is sustained, and all of these things really help to maintain the ecosystem, the status quo that we have in ensuring that life in itself is sustained. And aquatic life can reproduce, and livelihoods are also preserved. So now taking it to One Health itself, we are able to, as I explained earlier before, we are able to see that if again we sustainably and do blue foods right, we are replenishing or sustaining our blue food systems. We see that while we are also gaining from the resource that we can get from blue foods, we are replenishing our health. We are not consuming polluted resources or foods that have been contaminated with pesticides and so many contaminants in the ocean. We are also taking care of the marine ecosystem itself. We are ensuring that these ecosystems are there to also reproduce, to live a life that is free from pain and suffering, and to ensure that the environment that they live in is also maintained. So all of these things really is it's very interconnected in itself. And if you sustain blue food resources, you improve climate change, you reduce the impacts or the propensity of even having climate change itself, and you also sustain and have One Health impacts across all those major interfaces of humans, for animals, and for environments. And another very key part of blue foods and climate change and One Health is, which I think is very important to bring out, is the livelihoods part of it. Because I come from a country, a developing country, Nigeria, and a lot of the people who depend on the blue foods, are these communities that they depend on those, on the blue economy basically for their sustainability, for their health, for their livelihood, for their nutrition. And it's important for us to see how we can be able to empower these communities, how we can be able to educate them about the essence of, sustainable use of blue foods, sustainable consumption, and how to be able to let them know that if they are able to work together to really sustain how much they use these resources, then they can be able to have them for a long time. And it's also important to see how also we can even engage some of this, how do I say it now? The very big companies, private companies who come, who come to use the Bluefield resources, and in a way also, reduce the how the communities are also able to even use their resources better. So it's all about the again, just to summarize, the connection between Bluefields and climate change and One Health is there, and we just need to recognize it. We need to educate people about it. We need to empower people to be able to take charge of their own blue economies and be able to sustainably use their resources in a way that can serve them decades, centuries, and years to come.
Thank you, Kiki. That really brings out, I think, the interlinkages and the way we need to consider interlinkages between all the values that are implicated here, as well as the stakes, the really big stakes that are at play in getting this right. And I wanted to turn over now to Sofika to ask, building on this, how can we discuss the value of addressing blue foods and climate action without glossing over important differences or treating blue foods as a one-size-fits-all solution?
Yeah, thank you. It's absolutely not a one-size-fits-all solution, which is unfortunate for those that are painting it as such. So blue foods are now being seen as a potential panacea for all the problems of intense industrial land-based agriculture. A lot of attention, a lot of resources, and a lot of energy is beginning to shift from land-based animal agriculture towards blue foods, leaner forms of protein. We don't have as much of a connection to these animals, that we don't understand how they feel, how they express themselves. So there's not the empathy, I guess, that's already been created for a lot of land-based animal farming. It seems like the oceans are able to provide endless resources for us. So I do think that, blue foods is being sold that way, but we have to very intentionally and immediately intervene so that we don't create this waterbed effect, where all the negative impacts that we've witnessed for decades on land are suddenly shifted to a different environment, into the watery environment, and we kind of close our eyes and say, okay, problem solved. We've done a great job, pat ourselves on the back. So again, there are a lot of solutions, a lot of opportunities to do this right, but we have to do it mindfully from the beginning. As governments begin investing a lot more in aquaculture, in their own fishing fleets, it's got to be done right. We have to get away from the dirty diesel of those vessels. We have to get away from intensive aquaculture, where we're adding more and more chemicals into the environment, increasing stocking densities in these farms that invariably leads to disease outbreaks, to unbelievable suffering for the individuals in those systems. So let's, take a pause. Let's learn what we've learned from land-based agriculture before we start pushing really heavily on blue foods. But we know kelp farming, algae farming, other aquatic plants, shellfish farming, bivalves, all of those are excellent solutions. Smaller scale farms, smaller scale cooking practices, fantastic solutions. And that's kind of doing blue foods right, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we also need to conduct these practices humanely. We need to be very mindful of labor practices as well, because that's often something that is an afterthought, or it's something that's completely tucked away in the background. Another hidden significant cost of industrial scale food systems, and we have to do it sustainably.
Thank you. And that really outlines some of the risks we face as we talk about kind of shifts from land-based to aquatic-based foods. And you touched on this already, and bearing in mind the diversity of different contexts and the way things can vary around the world. I was wondering if you could expand on some of the points you mentioned about what kinds of blue foods and production methods are most promising as climate change mitigation and adaptation solutions, and if there are any context considerations that you want to highlight as well.
For sure. So I'll underscore raising plants in intensive environments can actually sequester carbon. Bivalves and plants can often filter the water, so it's actually a net positive outcome for the environment. So those we can absolutely stand behind with a lot of confidence. Cellular agriculture or aquaculture and plant-based seafood production is also a really interesting and promising space, and one that I think governments and corporations should invest significantly in more moving forward. But again, there are risks with, for example, the first ever closed loop bluefin tuna farm has now been established in Spain. Is this sustainable? No. This is a highly migratory, very large carnivorous animal. And now we're raising it in a closed environment, in a pen. We need to feed it extraordinary amounts of other fish to grow it out. That's something that I think we should immediately feel very comfortable loudly and prominently raising a red flag and saying, absolutely not. This is not solving any of our problems.
Thank you. Yes, I think, yeah, that's those sorts of things I think we really need to be very conscious of. And I wanted to bring in Kiki here again for a One Health perspective and thinking about what can we do to maximize the sustainability and the One Health benefits and minimize the risks of blue foods.
Okay, so the very first thing that comes when you talk about, recommendations on how to really address blue foods in a very sustainable way is awareness. It's as simple as that. You need to really educate people, and you need to be very targeted. Like I mentioned before, we have quite a number of stakeholders in this entire blue food spectrum. And a very key part of this spectrum is the communities, the people that really depend on them. And I say this because they are a major stakeholder in this, in terms of the fact that a lot of times they are the ones that are closest to the environment. They know the environment better. They know the aquatic environment better. They know, they understand even what they use, what they consume most times the best. And if anything happens to those ecosystems, those ecosystems that they use, it impacts their livelihoods, it impacts their health, it impacts their nutrition, it impacts them being there in the first place. We've had cases, for example, in again, I'm coming back to my country, Nigeria, where we've had a whole set of people, a set of villages and communities and cultures even destroyed because of damaging of the Niger Delta area through oil pollution and things like that. So all of these things really has an impact, and we've even had people have health issues because of some of this pollution, because they are not doing using the blue ecosystem rights, the blue foods rights. So it's really important for us to educate such communities and tell them how to be able to better utilize their resources. And the other stakeholders that I really want in terms of getting their attention again will be the big companies, the tourism companies, the fishing companies, the shipping companies, and so many companies that actually use the blue ecosystem. It's also important to be able to educate them better on if there are new practices. There are some of the things that Sofika again has mentioned in terms of there are new emerging practices that we know that can be able to help us to use this blue ecosystem better. These are things that we should, these are the kind of knowledge that we should get across to them. Even establishing legal frameworks and abiding by such legal frameworks to be able to know how to better use the systems correctly, and also, getting them to align with the priorities. For example, a lot of commitments will be made in COP28. A lot of agreements will be put in place. Let's have very key ways to be able to get companies and countries to be able to abide and align with all these many agreements that can be able to improve our blue food systems, our aquatic environment, and in that way also, reduce the impacts of climate change. The other thing I want to, also see as a main recommendation is, research. We need to have more. We need to not just research for the sake of research sake, but research for the sake of actually applying it to how we can better improve the blue ecosystem, improve the sustainable use of blue food resources, and also improve climate change. So this research there should not just be sitting on the shelf and, just for publication, but to really apply them is also part of, also learning process that we all need to adopt. To find new innovations, find new ways to do things better, and then apply it and use it to educate communities and countries and various other stakeholders are involved in this entire sector. So thank you. Those are the key main points that I can bring up from here.
Thank you. And I think, that really highlights the importance of expanding our knowledge base in this area so we can consider these issues better. And I also really appreciated the focus you brought out on the different dimensions of both how these foods matter and affect local communities, as well as the importance of frameworks to manage the international dimensions of this as well. And with that, I wanted to loop in Kiki as well and ask about how equity, which is a really important discussion and should be central to our considerations of everything in climate action, how equity can be considered as part of Blue Foods discussions.
Absolutely. So equity.
Sorry, I meant apologies. I'm happy for you to come in there, but I said Kiki and I meant to turn over to Tony on that. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. So in Palau, our marine coastal resources are central to our culture, our livelihoods, who we are. And so when we speak about equity, we need to kind of look at it from my perspective, from where I've been working. I think it is so important to have everybody standing on equal ground, from echoing what Kiki was saying, from our local communities to our governments, everybody who is involved in this. I think it's one of the most important things that we need to kind of bring together to achieve doing Blue Foods right. And so when a good example is when we deployed our FADs, our fish aggregating devices, into the community, into the artisanal fishers in Palau, we also had to look at it from a standpoint of how do we promote their jobs, their livelihoods? How do we make them empowered to continue this? Because frankly, it's very expensive to make a living in Palau, and for fishers to try to find, ways of living by selling their fish to local markets or selling their fish to hotels. It was very difficult post-pandemic to kind of bring that back up. And so for equity, it is very important. It is very important to kind of put everything into, not into like a very neat looking bundle, but to have to kind of work at it and to make sure that everybody is recognized and all the work that gets put into it is recognized. So I think, thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. And that's something that I think that's a great note for us to finish on, because I think we're just at time now. And I think we really had an incredible discussion here today. I want to thank all of our panelists. We had a terrific scene setting from Walter, really giving us the broad overview. We had great contributions from Sofika, bringing out kind of the particular types of practices and foods that we should be thinking of. Kiki brought in really important considerations of the One Health framework and how that can be used to manage these different considerations. And then we had Tony, who brought us a perspective of how a government is putting these into action and the sorts of things that other governments can think through and learn from, and the good practices that are out there. as we think more about these topics in the future. So please give a round of applause to our panelists, and thank you for joining.